Welcome to Twisted Remedies. I'm your host, Justin Kucher, and this is a podcast about the benefits of jiu-jitsu and other non-traditional remedies in trauma recovery. This is going to be part 2 of my conversation with Mike Cancellieri from Frontline Foundations of North America. If you listen to part 1, you already know that Frontline is a very important organization that supports veterans and first responders with mental health services, both in a 5-day outpatient program as well as individual counseling. Frontline Foundations is a nonprofit, so please consider donating to help support their mission as they provide those services, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Mike Cancellieri. So with all of that, and how do you measure success as somebody is moving through the program, or during the 5-day program, or whether people are coming in for outpatient? What does success look like, and how do you determine if that's happening?
Yeah. Well, just in the context of our 5-day program, within 5 days, we might see someone who was pretty guarded in the beginning and didn't want to participate a whole lot or say a whole lot. And again, we've started really talking about storytelling and telling your story, but I don't want to oversell it. We're very serious about people don't have to say anything they don't want to say. We do not pry. We create an environment that makes it safe and easy for you to start letting some stuff out. But I don't want to talk too much about this and make people think that, like, oh man, I got to spill my guts when I get there. It's not like that. But one way that I will measure success in a way is like people open up. And that might even just be cracking jokes a little bit more, but not defensive jokes. Like we all know, even professionally, what it's like when someone's just being defensive. But just loosening up, sharing a little more. We have a very laid back environment. Lila has created a very home type of feel to it. So, I'd have a young police officer show up wearing a shirt and tie like he was going to court. And then by day 2, he's just wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Right. By day 3, he's wearing Crocs and a tank top. That's one way I measure success.
So you're getting people are becoming comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I haven't been through the program, but I mentioned the retreat earlier, which I was fortunate enough to be invited to. And for listeners, it was 4 days in Lake George.
Yep.
And so I had already done a bunch of work with Beth, who was on. So I was pretty comfortable with stuff, but as I'm driving to Lake George for this thing, the feelers were going out like, boy, I don't, I don't know what this is. I don't, I don't know anybody here. I had met you. I had met Lila. I had met Beth, or I knew Beth well, and then I got there and I don't know what it was, but there was this within an hour.
Yep.
All of a sudden, everybody was incredibly comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
And even, I ended up knowing a couple of the people that were there from other agencies that I had worked with. And it was, I don't know what it was that broke those barriers that I was instinctively putting up, because it's like I haven't vetted these people. I don't know who these people are. But there was something about that experience where I was like, shortly into it, I was like, well, this is what we're doing, and I'm somehow comfortable.
Yeah.
And then, then people were sharing in varying degrees, obviously. And it just was, it was an amazing 4 days that I was not expecting to. I was hopeful that I was going to be that invested in it, but I was really not expecting that I was going to let myself go there.
Yeah.
And some Jedi mind trick happened. I don't know what it was. But the next thing I knew, it was it was a great experience. And it was, so I mean, if the 5-day program is anything like that, I couldn't recommend it high enough, because it was good. It was, again, I don't know what it was that happened, but it, I don't know if it was the giant fire we had in the fireplace or who knows what, but it was it was a very, and I'm sure that was intentional. I'm sure the room you guys picked was intentional,
Absolutely.
and so that's really cool.
Awesome.
Any, obviously, without sharing things that you can't share, any success stories that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, well, there's a large professional fire department that I don't know would want to be named
Yep.
for this success story,
Yep.
but one of the things that we do is we do Qigong in the morning in our 5-day program, which for listeners that aren't familiar, most people have some sense of what Tai Chi looks like.
Yep.
A bunch of people in a park doing very like flowy martial arts type of movements. Qigong is a lot like that. It's related to Tai Chi, but it's really mostly about health. And there's a deep philosophy and tradition behind Qigong, but mostly we use it for mindfulness purposes. It gives you something physical to focus on so that when your mind wanders someplace, you can start getting reps in of pulling your mind back to the movements. Most people hate it at first, and it's kind of entertaining to get a bunch of like state troopers and Marine Corps guys doing these these Qigong movements. But success story, large professional fire department, they do that in their apparatus bay, sometimes with the doors open so the public can see these guys.
That's
but
great.
Man, that is for me, that's a success story.
Yeah.
We did this veteran, and not wasn't veterans. This was a first responder focused conference at Castleton a couple weeks ago, and there was like 3 people in the audience wearing our T-shirts. That's a success story.
Yeah.
The person who organized that conference introduced my keynote address, saying how our program changed her life. That's a success story. Yeah, and that's like a thing in the mental health field is everyone wants to measure success with 400 question surveys and with like double-blind controlled trials and with all that kind of stuff. And that's great if you're trying to get a research paper published, if you're trying to get a shiny postdoc position somewhere, if you're trying to get funding for a new medication, that's all great. That ain't how I measure success. I measure success by having a bunch of angry firefighters doing Qigong in the apparatus bay, by people wearing our T-shirts, by people, Joe Gorman, who we talked about, our peer counselor, he does all of our alumni stuff, and we have a Facebook group, a WhatsApp messenger group, online meetings, and since Joe started really developing that part of the program, we got huge buy-in. We have these meetings where there's like attendance and people that were in different cohorts together. A cohort is what we call, like, you come to my 5-day program, your group is the cohort. But the guys and gals you were in there with, we call that a cohort. But on these meetings, people that were in different cohorts that never met each other start to talk, and then now they have one-to-one relationships. That's how we measure success. Those are all. I don't think I could come up with a particular success story right now, other than I've had lots of people come to us talking about how they're on their last leg and at the end of their rope, and they ain't at the end of their rope anymore. They're living life and enjoying it. Those are success stories. Those are the way that I measure success. So, there's nothing wrong with the latest and greatest technology and research. And if it helps people, I'm all for it. It's just not my style.
Yep.
It's just not what we do. We look backward. What has been helping warriors for thousands of years? And we measure success in similar ways.
So now that we've talked about success, I'm sure it's not easy. What are the challenges in working? I mean, we've talked a little bit about how first responders, vets, that people who are warriors and wired a certain way, bring some challenges to the party of getting help, accepting help, whatever it is, and even, I guess, once you get them in the program, like what are the challenges that you face in getting to those success points that you mentioned? Yeah,
it's really. There's 2 main things. There's the ice wall that we have all built in front of our hearts. That's a big challenge. And maybe I'll say a little more about that, come at it from a different angle. But another challenge is, like, what if you actually need to be working 1 million hours? because you got kids and you bought a house at the exact wrong time before COVID, all this stuff. Like, what if you really need to be, we really encourage people, don't, like, if you can get 5 days off from work, like, it's much better if you cannot go into work in the middle of this process that we're doing. Sometimes people can't do that. So just real world challenges, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Working too many hours and you don't really have a choice. But then again, back to the wall of ice in front of our hearts. We try to, one goal that I have is to broaden people's understanding of what courage is. None of us that are in the room right now or in my program are afraid to do things that most of society won't do. Like almost everyone, big, tall, strong, short, and skinny, old, young, male, female, it doesn't matter. Everyone that walks through my door, I would absolutely have them right next to me, kicking in a door and going into a dangerous situation. So, like, that's not a problem for us.
Right.
But if you don't have a broad enough understanding of what courage is, you're not going to be able to open up. And that's the big challenge. And so I'll often give this, I'm basically giving this speech right now that I give in the program, but it's like there's two kinds of courage. Kicking in the door is one kind of courage. Everybody's got that. Everybody in this room has that. The other kind of courage is to just say a couple of things about my experience in the last couple of months and what brought me here to this program and the way my relationship with my wife used to be that I'd like to be different, the way that my relationship with my kids used to be that I would like to be different. And just opening the door to talking about that stuff is a huge challenge. And again, like there's an emphasis in our discussion right now about talking about this stuff. That's one element of our program. That's smack in the middle of the day. Most of what we do is actually mindfulness education, practicing different meditation techniques. We do a lot of breathing. We do a lot of movement. We go out in the middle of the week and do something that's intended to be fun, like a hike, fishing sometimes. But it's overcoming our own. Your question is like, what are some challenges? It's logistical challenges about your life and what you got to do for work and to keep the bills paid and the lights on. And then just that willingness to open up a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that's good perspective that you threw out, that this 5 days is not just sitting in a room staring at each other and talking about, it's a lot of other things. And from what I understand, it's more other things than it is staring at each other across the room.
Yeah.
So, I think for people listening or on the fence or whatever, I think that's an important distinction to make, because it's, the other programs out there, I think, are a lot of sitting across and talking and a lot of, you're going to sit here until we talk about this. And that's we're going to be here a while.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a good distinction to make.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned stigma earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember coming up, in my career, for the majority of it, there was definitely a stigma around, like, and I've said this on episodes before, you go to the call, if it's a bad call, you got to go to when it's done, you got to go to the next thing. Yeah. And there were, like later in my career, we did critical incident debriefs and stuff. I think the stigma has improved. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I got out, it was trending that way, mm-hmm. but there's still stigma. Well, I guess I should say this. There is stigma unless you are one of the people, like in my experience, I finally got to the point where there was the stigma to be damned. Like, it's time to get some help because things were unraveling. So I don't know if that, I hope that there's other ways to overcome that stigma, but mm-hmm. how do you, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I think this is worth digging into a little more. Like, how do you get people to really just overcome the stigma, mm-hmm. just to even get them in the door? Obviously, once they're in the door, the education piece is huge, mm-hmm. and talking about the courage and all the things mm-hmm. once they're there. But how do you get them to take that first step and get what they need? Yeah,
we really emphasize that what we're teaching are skills, which is True. Well, we're teaching mindfulness skills, and you mentioned perishable skills earlier. My 20-year-old brief martial arts career, I haven't trained since then. It's like, that's a perishable skill,
Right.
and you'll find that out the hard way if you shoot your mouth off too much. That's why I'm not interested in getting in the ring with anybody right now. But mindfulness skills are also perishable, and that's very relatable to people in these types of professions. So. We really heavily emphasize that what we're teaching you are skills. I'm not trying to rewire your brain. I'm not trying to make you feel bad about your decisions, about your career, or who you are as a person. I'm trying to teach you skills. So it's like, if you want to have a better time at work and at home, mindfulness is a valuable tool. Breathing is an essential tool. All of the different things that we teach them as skills. That's a lot more relatable. It's true, but that's a lot more relatable to put it that way, as opposed to, oh, it's therapy and we're going to monkey around with your mind in some way. It's
right.
like we're teaching techniques that are thousands of years old that have been helping warriors for that whole time. When I go to different departments, police departments and fire departments, private ambulance services, and I'll do like a 4-hour resiliency skills training, and it's marketed as like a way to improve your life satisfaction and de-stress. The job is easier, home life is easier. People understand that,
right?
And there isn't so much of there's still a little bit, but there isn't so much of a stigma to learning resiliency skills while I'm still on the job. That stuff that I teach in those trainings is the same stuff I teach when you come to my program. The emphasis might be a little different.
Right.
You come to my program, the emphasis might be on helping you get unstuck in life, but the skills are the same. I don't tend to talk a whole lot about the different types of traumatic experiences that people like you and I would have had if I'm in an in-service training.
Right.
So, but I'll use different examples in my program. So it's like, that's one way to start hammering down stigma, to really educate people that this is about skills. It's about learning how to be resilient. It's about learning how to work with your attention. That's what mindfulness is really about, what you do with your attention. It's not about controlling your thoughts. That doesn't work. We could do a little experiment right now. It's like, everybody shut up for 30 seconds and see if you could control your thoughts. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can learn through repetition how to put your attention where you want it. And that might be on your kids on Christmas morning instead of all the admin stuff at work and the horrible call you were at. So mindfulness is about attention. That's just one example, but that's the overarching question. Start hammering down some of the stigma by talking about skills. That's what it is.
Yeah. So it's really not, it sounds like it's not focusing on, we're here to talk about your mental health. And
yeah, right. Yeah. And it's so funny, like, because the way you said that, I've heard that exact phrase in that exact tone come out of the mouth of many people who were very well intentioned.
Right.
No doubt. But you're screwing up big time if that's how you're approaching a combat vet that just did 4 combat tours, a police officer that's been on the job for 20 years, a firefighter that's, just got done doing CPR on the double yellow line in the middle of the road at 3 a.m. Like, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Like,
so it goes back to the intentionality that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From what I know of the program, from people I've talked to, from going to the retreat, lots of success stories. Mm-hmm. What's been the most rewarding aspect of doing, and I think I know the answer, but what's the most rewarding aspect of doing this work and getting the help to the people that need it?
Yeah, there's a million different ways for me to answer that. So personally speaking, first of all, it keeps me on track. Like I said, I'm on this journey with all of my clients.
Yep.
It keeps me on track. It gives me the ability to practice what I preach, knowing that I have to be up in front of people talking this stuff. And I've worked with people in my mental health career that were selling one line of things, and then when they got home at the end of the day, they were doing the exact opposite of what they're telling their clients to. So it's very rewarding to be able to do this for a living, to be with people that share the same experiences and to have it also be something that's helping me. And I think that is another thing that gives not just me, but my entire team. Everything I'm saying pretty much goes for our entire team, which is like 7 people. That's very rewarding to be on the path, shoulder to shoulder with these warriors, these vets and first responders. It's very rewarding. To be able to, I don't even know how this happened, but a plug for taking like a leap of faith. The universe seems to reward that. There's no real reason that what we did should have been successful. Starting a healthcare organization with very little capital at the beginning of a horrendous pandemic. It's like you couldn't have written a worse set of circumstances. But somehow it's all worked out. And I think it's all worked out because what we do is 100% from the heart and honest. It's 100% honest. If we make a mistake, if we don't send the right message sometimes or whatever, it's still honest and people react to that.
Yeah.
To be able to take someone who is totally shut down and closed off and not into this, and maybe it's not exactly their idea to come to our program, but they're doing it for their wife, for their kids, or their boss, or whatever, and to see them open up over the course of 5 days and to start to see the relief, and just like you could look at somebody and it's like that dude is carrying a tremendous amount of weight. You know what that look is like, and I know what that look is like.
Yeah.
To see that start to melt off a little bit is extremely rewarding.
I think that honesty that you're talking about
Yeah.
is, now that you've said that I think is what it was about the retreat anyway. Yeah. That, seeing that, and not just from you and Lila and, everybody from your staff that was there.
Yeah.
That I think is the difference in breaking, melting that ice. I think when you're sitting there and you have other people with and again, you've mentioned this, but your staff has, they're retired law enforcement, retired firefighter, like they get it and they've been there. And I think that honesty is a big part of why, whether you are expecting to, jump into this head first or not, I think that's a big piece of why it works when people get there, even if they don't want it to.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't, when you see it and you're faced with it, you can't not see it. You can't deny that it's there. And then you just, it's compelling. So.
Absolutely. I worked for a different program at one point in my career, and their sort of method was do all these things that we're telling you to do because we know that they work, and you just have to do them. And don't ask a whole lot of questions, but just like do these things. And they had some success with that because cops and firefighters and vets are used to being like, all right, I just got to,
do what I'm told.
I got to stand on the yellow footprints and we'll do this.
Yep.
But that's not my style at all. And I saw a lot of people, when I was working at that particular job, I saw a lot of people that I felt like we could have helped, but slipped through the cracks because they weren't into, here's your box of crayons and draw a picture of what this traumatic experience made you feel like. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So that honesty is so crucial, as you were saying. And that, so that the ability to do that is one of the most rewarding things about this work and this job, and having this team that I have, 3 firefighters, a retired police officer, family members of veterans, the ability and the creative control that we have to do what we think is necessary in a way that we think is the right way to do it. I dropped a lot of F-bombs in this keynote speech, the 2 hours tirade I gave at this vet. I keep saying vet and first responder. This particular conference was just for first responders, although there was some veterans there. If I had a director,
right,
like, well, Michael, I don't know that, this is, you're not really representing for the organization, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. We wouldn't have been able to we had this crazy idea where Beth, who who was on this podcast, I love that episode, powerful individual. Beth and Bill Elwell and Lila and I, when we planned that retreat, we spitballed a bunch of crazy ass ideas. And the overarching framework was like the hero's journey. So like Joseph Campbell type of stuff, which, on certain of your episodes, you've disclose that you're a little bit of a nerd, and there's some nerdery that could happen around here. So anyone that's into Star Wars, it's like that whole thing was heavily influenced by Joseph Campbell's work. We talked earlier in this episode about how storytelling is so important. So we put that retreat together, and it's like, we're going to take Joseph Campbell's, which, by the way, he basically was a guy that made the work of Carl Jung readable for the average person. That's kind of a way to understand Joseph Campbell. But we took that hero's journey and we made a retreat out of it.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you have a director over you who is looking at the bottom line and who is worried about like insurance reimbursement and how is this going to work and how's the organization going to, you can't do none of that. So the honesty that we have, the creative control that we have, I can't believe that I'm like in this position where I can take this whole idea of going back 10,000 years and how were warriors cared for, and I can actually deliver that to my clients, and no one can tell me not to.
Right.
And it works.
That's great.
So that all of that is the most rewarding part of it.
So my hope is that somebody listening to this, whether they are somebody who needs to go to the program or thinks they would benefit from the program, or a provider or somebody, like how does somebody go to your 5-day program?
Yeah, cool. So number one, we have a pretty good website, which we'll, I'm sure, link in the show notes.
We certainly will.
Is that an industry term? The show notes?
The show notes are a podcasting term.
Yeah. We'll link our website, but it's frontlinefoundations.org. Sidebar, one of the primary mindfulness tools that we teach is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That's why we're called Frontline Foundations. 4 years later, it turns out that that's confusing to people because everyone thinks that we're a foundation. But anyway, so our website is frontlinefoundations.org, and you can learn quite a bit about what we do at that website. Our contact information is on that website. So anyone that's interested in our 5-day program can learn a ton about it on our website. They can also locate our email address. General email address is flf@frontlinefoundations.org. They can send a question. You can just say, "Hey, I'm a cop. I want to come to your that in fact is a lot of the emails we get. Super short, super sweet. I'm a cop. I want things to be better.
Help me.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah.
So send an email to flf@frontlinefoundations.org, and like a real live human being, one of our 7 staff, probably me, will get back to you. Usually once we make initial contact by email or whatever, we'll have like a phone conversation, which will sound exactly like how you and I are talking right now, because we're real people again. Yeah. But yeah, that's it. Check out our website, reach out by phone or by email, and we'll talk. Our 5-day program, we run that 1 week every month.
Oh, wow.
So we only run it once a month. Part of that is because the level of honesty that we have and the amount of energy that we put into this would make it real difficult for our staff to just do this Monday through Friday every day.
I was exhausted after the 4-day retreat.
Yeah.
In a good way. But I can imagine, I went through it once. So doing it once a month even has got to be, it's got to be a lot.
It's a lot. And again, best job I ever had, very rewarding. I love what we do. But that's why we do it once a month. We have not yet had a problem with being too busy that people can't get in. It's getting busier, which is a good thing for the organization and for battling stigma and all that stuff. But yeah, reach out and we'll talk and we'll figure out what month would be good for you guys or whoever's interested to come to the program and go from there.
Thinking about people that aren't to that point yet. Somebody out there, first responder, vet, somebody struggling. They're starting, they're recognizing the signs. Mm-hmm. They're noticing, families telling them like, your check, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What advice or what specific thing or message do you have for them that to hopefully point them in the right direction?
All right. Number one, something that I think they'll actually do is you got to take time for yourself and do something healthy. And a lot of times when people like us start having a hard time, whatever it is that you used to like to do goes right out the window. So,
Yep.
I'm in a room here with a bunch of basses, guitars, and a drum kit and a bunch of recording equipment. I would just imagine that at a certain point in your career, you hadn't touched a guitar in a little while.
Yep.
Right. So in terms of advice I could give that people will follow in that situation you described, get back to doing something that you used to love to do. Carve out. I don't care how busy you are at work. We all have worked a ton of overtime. We all get it, but you have to do that. You have to reclaim part of your own life that has nothing to do with being a cop or a firefighter. There's nothing to do with the military. You got to reclaim that. Maybe it's hitting golf balls and you haven't done that for 6 months. Well, you've got to go out there and get a bucket of balls and hit the balls, whether you want to or not, even if you hate every minute of it. So advice that people are going to follow is carve out some time, reclaim something that you used to love to do, and do it. Advice that they're probably not going to follow, but I wish they would, is don't wait until it forces your hand. Like life forces your hand.
Yeah.
Maybe that happens to be your boss. Maybe it happens to be your wife or whatever, or your significant other, or your own, your own mental health and well-being. When you wake up one morning, it's like, I can't stand the idea of going in for one more shift.
Right.
Like I've been there before. Don't wait until that happens. If you're even thinking about getting some kind of help, do it way sooner than you think. Everyone thinks that they're going to they're going to be the only guy in there that I'm really okay. And this stuff doesn't apply to me. It applies to everyone.
Yep.
I've had young firefighters and police officers that are, police officers would be like 21, 22. I've had like 18-year-old firefighters before that this stuff really helps them and will help them continue their career. So don't wait. Very often in our cohorts, I'll have a retirement age guy or gal, and I'll have a guy or gal at the beginning of their career. 100% of the time, the older person looks at the younger person and says, I wish I had done this at your age. That happens 100% of the time. I have never seen retirement age people and young people in the same room where that discussion doesn't come up. So let that be the thing that motivates you to get help way sooner than you think you need it.
I've said those exact words to newer cops when I was still on the job. Don't wait 18 years and, until it's bigger than it should be.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for that is you at the end of your career, if you do, especially people that come to our program, they realize they're this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's not, they didn't monkey around with my brain. They didn't change. They didn't tell me I have to change everything about my lifestyle.
It's your fault. You have to fix this.
Exactly.
And this,
It wasn't like that. What it was I have to work a little bit of breathing into my day. I should probably start to work a little bit of mindfulness practice into my day. I should have some fun, God forbid, now and then. I discovered some ways that I can communicate with my family about stuff I don't really want to talk about, but I can let them in a little bit. They realize that that is kind of, now, it takes a lot out of you for sure, but it's a lot simpler and easier than people think it was.
Yeah.
And so if you're at the end of a 25-year career and you do this process and you're I could have just done this and saved myself years and years of friction and heartache and questioning and all that, that's what really makes people say that to the young people. I wish I would have done this. So advice that people will follow: reclaim something that you love, that you used to do that you haven't been doing lately. Advice that I wish people would follow: get help sooner than later. You will never be sorry that you got help sooner.
Yeah. You've been very generous with your time, but I got a few more questions for you. So I ask this of everybody, and if you've listened to episodes, you've heard me say this. You, I think, more than other guests in certain ways, you invest a lot emotionally into what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's a heavy component. Like you said, you only do these things once a month because you have to, I'm sure, recover from that.
Yeah, no doubt.
So one of the things I ask everybody is, this is called Twisted Remedies, and mine is getting, sweaty and beat up in pajamas.
Yeah.
Playing music and stuff, cold plunge, all of that. What are your Twisted Remedies? How do you maintain? How do you heal? How do you strengthen yourself back up?
Yeah. Awesome. One thing I like to talk about in terms of post-traumatic stress is there is no better remedy for post-traumatic stress than physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the only thing you have to do. There's a lot of other things, but there's nothing better than physical activity. So one thing that I have found that really helps me is walking. I haven't done a lot of that recently, but at various points in my life, I know when it's time, and it's like, nope, I got to go out, and sometimes I'll have like a ruck on, and I'll make like a real workout out of it. Sometimes I'll just go for a walk, like a long walk, like 3 miles, 5 miles, that type of thing. Enough time to really sink into the rhythm of walking. Now, I found out that I'm good at walking. I'm not so good at running.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah, isn't that something? But I can walk for a long time, and I kind of discovered it accidentally. Like, that really is very helpful for me. And when you had Beth Jacobs on, you guys had talked about how that's part of the way that the modality of EMDR therapy was invented. You know, the inventor was taking a walk and thinking about things and noticing, like, I feel a little better. I actually didn't know that before I met Beth, and she, let me in on that. So walking is a big one for me. Sometimes I'll do a lot of. I like the outdoors quite a bit, so hiking. I'll do overnights in the woods, start fires by scratch, that type of thing. I got a bunch of stuff I do. Fishing is huge for me.
You caught some monsters recently.
Yeah, man, a couple of good ones. It's been pretty rough lately, but we did good so far this season. Bass fishing is a mindfulness technique, and most of what I do is from a kayak.
Yep.
And so I'm out there, I'm reading the weather, I'm reading the sunlight, I'm looking at structure, I'm looking at vegetation. I got to know a little something about where they might be. Then I got to select the proper equipment. What rod, what reel, what line, what lure, all of this stuff. And all of that keeps the mind focused on the task at hand, which is bass fishing. So that's a mindfulness exercise. And that's a very, very helpful thing for me. So yeah, between hiking and the outdoors, fishing, I play music a little bit. I actually play the drums. I screw around on the guitar. That's very helpful. And all of these things that I'm saying are things that help me, but it's not like I do all of them all the time. And I fall off the wagon with my own self-care, just like anybody else.
Yep.
I always say I'm always on the hunt to practice what I preach more often. But
that's that honesty again.
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way with people when they're like, oh, he's having the same issues I'm having.
It was like a real guy.
Yeah. Oh,
look at that. This is like a real guy.
Right.
So those are some things that I do. I do them at different times a year, and sometimes I don't do nothing for weeks. And when that happens, I start to notice that there's more friction in my life.
Yep.
There's more friction in my relationships. Some low-hanging fruit for me is when I start to get like more road rage going on. It's like, oh, I get it. I haven't been practicing what I preach. I haven't been taking walks. I haven't been doing my own breathing and mindfulness exercises. But like the thing that I'm very proud of lately is I don't beat myself up anymore when I notice that as much. I don't beat myself. It's like, oh, you grabastic piece of amphibian shit. You haven't done your, like, I don't do that anymore. I just get right back on the horse. So yeah, have like some more advice. Have like different tools in your toolbox, and it doesn't have to be like right out of the DSM or any kind of fancy like mental health type of thing. It's have some tools in your toolbox: jiu-jitsu, music, hiking, whatever, artwork, whatever it is that you like to do. Have some different tools. Go to them at different times.
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges we didn't talk about, you mentioned at the onset of this that Frontline is nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Which comes with a whole, aside from the challenges you face in the program, the challenge of a nonprofit, as far as fundraising and trying to, keep the lights on to help people.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, just that struggle and
Sure.
how people can, I don't have a huge audience, but I'm hoping to get there, and
Yeah.
we can, anything I can help to try to head your way, I think.
Awesome.
I think would be great. So that struggle, I'm sure a daily
Yeah,
thought.
absolutely. And a lot of that weight falls on Lila's shoulders, my wife, who does like. So part of this, here's part of the struggle. Uh, when we started this organization, we thought we were just going to bill people's health insurance and that was going to work out fine. Well, it turns out, I don't know how negative I want to get on the podcast, but it turns out that like large insurance companies are basically trying to kill little guys like us. One thing that they seem to do is just deny every claim that comes in, just on general principle. We just deny it, and then you figure out what it is.
Right.
That's horrible, but it's not the end of the world if you have an entire billing department. You have a medical records department and a medical billing department. All of those departments I just mentioned are Lila. So when they deny a claim on a person that has insurance that we take for a service that we have billed that company for before, that costs Lila like 3 hours of work. And then the answer usually is, well, you didn't see on page 72 sub A, section 1, Charlie, you didn't see there's a checkbox there that's like, does the guy have a primary care provider? And you left that unchecked. So I could go on, but I'd rather not. But that's a real challenge. So like our reimbursement model is not sustainable in terms of health insurance. What has kept our lights on and kept us being able to do this work is a lot of donations, a lot of small donations from a lot of people, and a few big donations from a few people that really support what we do. Some of those larger donors, I'm not sure that I'm at liberty to talk about right now, but one that I am is an organization called Ride 22 out of Massachusetts. That's a bunch of awesome people that love riding motorcycles and have lost some important people in their lives, veterans, to suicide, and they raise a lot of money to do whatever they can to prevent that from happening. And Ride 22 has been there for us since the beginning, and they usually kick us like a substantial donation, excuse me, after events that they have.
Yep.
That type of thing is very helpful. There's been other large donors, like I've said, but people that are kicking out $50 and $100 and $25 donations on our website, that like keeps the lights on.
Every little bit. Yeah.
Every little bit keeps the lights on. The other thing I would love to mention is our, we are in the health center at Rockingham in Bellows Falls, Vermont, and the people that host our program in this large health center, which contains an urgent care and a commercial gym and a lightweight psychiatric unit. I hope that didn't sound judgmental, but that whole building, they love us and they support us, and they made it possible for us to exist by, charging us an amount of rent that we can afford, and all the other logistics are so helpful. We wouldn't be around without Marty, who's our landlord, and the rest of the people that are involved in that.
Yeah.
So those are the challenges. It's like you got to keep the lights on. You exist in a model that is meant for huge corporations and that is driven by research and people that are promoting the advancement of their careers. And here we are, just a bunch of people that have had experiences like you've had and are doing this from the heart. That's not like a good financial model.
Right.
But again, another plug for taking a leap of faith. It's like the universe seems to reward that. We seem to be sustained in ways that I can't explain, that are powerful. But yeah, it continues to be a challenge, but this is the type of fight I want to be in.
Yeah.
Not the type of fight where you're like, the 75 layers of middle management at your department, and like the new guy's got these crazy ideas, and now it's emails. And like, I'm sick of that fight. I'm all right with being in this fight because it's worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we covered a lot of ground, as I hoped we would, and I knew we would. Again, I honored to have you on. I'm this, I'm not sure what this is that I'm doing, but it's working. And, and I think I say this, I think I've said this almost on every episode, but if one person hearing this gets something beneficial and can turn their life around, I think it's a success. And I think, your retreat was powerful for me. And, so thank you for coming on. And this has been great.
It's an honor for me to be here. I love what you're doing. This is going to work. It's going to work. That's the universe rewards that kind of thing. So think about the way that you got into doing this podcast, similar to the way I got into doing what I did, like just walked backwards into it. And this is what I'm doing. And yeah, if one person is helped by it, that's like, then what you do and what I do will be totally worth it. So thank you very much for having me.
And that was part 2 of my conversation with Mike Cancellieri. Again, Frontline is a nonprofit. Please consider making a donation to support their cause. As you heard Mike say, every little bit helps, and that is what drives a lot of their funding is the smaller donations. Stay tuned for more from Frontline during this September fundraising drive for them. As another guest coming on is Joe Gorman, their peer support counselor. Again, thank you for listening, and as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.